Hello, everybody. Today we're going to read chapter 52, Picking and Picketing. Lucia and Maria Mendoza, 18 and 17, stumbled out of bed at 2 a.m., dressed in the dark, went into the kitchen of their adobe house, made a Chapter 52. Today's guest speaker is Mrs. Hill herself. All right. Picking and picketing. Lucia and Maria Mendoza, 18 and 17, stumbled out of bed at 2 a.m., dressed in the dark, went into the kitchen of their adobe house, made a lunch of tacos and soda pop, and filled a thermos with hot soup. Then they woke their dad and their younger brother. Soon the four of them were headed north, toward the border between Mexico and the United States. They were on their way to pick lettuce in California. Each of them expected to make $16 that Tuesday. It wasn't much, but it was more than they could earn at home. They would use short-handled hoes that kept them bent over all day. It was hot, dusty, back-breaking work. The Mendozas were soon part of a line of cars making for the picking fields. These Mexican farm workers were entering the United States legally. They they were wanted to help harvest crops to feed people across the nation. But some of them would stay in the United States illegally. Hundreds and thousands of them had already done it. Most illegal immigrants had little schooling and few marketable skills. They were crowded into cities in poor districts, barrios. Their children needed to go to school. They needed job training and help. All that cost taxpayer money. Some Americans resented them. Many said that the Mexicans took jobs from American citizens, especially from Mexican Americans. It wasn't their fault that they took those jobs. The growers wanted them instead of Americans because they would work for less money. They could live on less. Life in Mexico was cheaper than life in the United States. Once they were across the border, the Mendozas parked their car and walked to a place where workers were hired for agricultural jobs. By 3:30 a.m., they were settled just behind the driver in an old rattle-trap bus headed north toward lettuce fields. Most of the 46 passengers tried to sleep. They knew they had a long ride ahead of them, and it was still dark. Later, one passenger would remember that they had been going very fast when the driver missed a curve and the bus became airborne, crashing into the bank of a canal, bouncing off that bank to another bank, and settling in a shallow waterway. All the seats in the old bus flew out of their sockets in a mess of arms, legs, twisted metal, and broken glass. 19 passengers were trapped in the bottom of the bus. They drowned in 2.5 feet of water. The four Mendozas were among them. Cesar Chavez wept for Lucia and Maria and the others who lay in the silent caskets. Chavez was an American of Mexican heritage. Like most of the 2,000 mourners at the special funeral mass for the victims, he was a devout Roman Catholic. Everyone knew Chavez. He was the leader of the Farm Workers Association and famous. They knew he cared about people, especially farm workers. They wanted to hear what he had to say. Speaking in Spanish, Chavez told them, "This tragedy happened because of the greed of the big growers who did not care about the safety of the workers and who exposed them to grave dangers when they transport them in wheeled coffins to the field. The workers learned long ago that the growers and labor contractors have too little regard for the value of any individual worker's life. The trucks and the buses are old and unsafe. The fields are sprayed with poisons. The laws that do exist are not enforced. How long will it be before we take seriously the importance of the workers who harvest the food we eat? Here's a picture of Cesar Chavez. He devoted his life to helping migrant farm workers. Here is a photo over here. The caption reads, "These migrant farm workers are picking grapes in California." One farm worker said, "We need Mexicans for the labor. For some reason, you need a mule." For the same reason, you need a mule. Huddled in a miserable shack in California, this migrant woman and child likely moved to another equally awful hovel on another farm within weeks. Chavez knew all about harvesting food. He had been a migrant worker himself, traveling from bean fields to walnut groves to grape arbors, following the harvest of the seasons. That meant living in a tent or whatever room could be found. When he was a boy, it meant changing schools as often as changing picking fields. It meant sometimes not having shoes or a bathroom to use. By the time Caesar graduated from 8th grade, he had attended 38 different schools. There was something special about Chavez. Although it was hard to decide quite what it was, he had a pleasant round face with brown skin and dark straight hair. There was nothing out of the ordinary about that. He was a gentleman, and he didn't boast or call attention to himself. But when he had a job to do, he did it carefully and well. He could be trusted. He was honest, thoroughly honest. So when people needed help, they often turned to him. Fred Ross, an organizer who came to California to try to help farm workers, heard about Cesar Chavez and gave him a job with the community service organization, which helped poor people deal with many kinds of problems. Chavez was soon helping those people find housing, medical care, food, and if they needed legal aid, a lawyer, he got them to register to vote, and he made them realize the power of the vote. Then he began to start thinking about a labor union for farm workers. A labor union is an organization of people, usually all doing the same kind of work, who get together to try to make life better for themselves. Factory unions are easy to organize. Most of the workers are together in one place. But getting agricultural workers organized isn't easy at all. In California, farm workers labored on thousands of farms that stretched the length of the state. Chavez knew that many growers took advantage of the workers. They paid them little, they ignored unsafe conditions, they got their children to work even though that was against the law, and sometimes they cheated them on their pay. By themselves, the workers had no power. But if Chavez could organize them into a union, they could demand fair wages and safe conditions. Cesar Chavez had a wife, 8 children, and a steady job with the CSO. When he told his wife he wanted to quit his job to try to start a union, what do you think she said? She knew the family might go hungry if he had no regular work. What would you say? Well, Helen Chavez said okay. She understood that if La Casa, the cause, were successful, it would help millions of people. And knowing Cesar, Helen Chavez thought there was a good chance it would be successful. It was 1962, and Cesar Chavez started going from farm to farm talking to workers. 3 years later, his Farm Workers Association voted to join Filipino farm workers in a strike against the grape growers. The workers refused to pick grapes until they got better pay and better working conditions. The growers hired other pickers. Union members marched near the grape fields with signs that said "Huluga," which meant strike in Spanish. Chavez convinced some of the new pickers to stop work and strike with them. So here's Cesar Chavez marching with those migrant farm workers. They trusted him because he was one of them. He had lived their life and understood their hardships. California's biggest industry is agriculture, and grapes are the biggest money crop. Before La Casa, those who picked the crops got little benefit from the riches they helped create. Cesar Chavez insisted that the farm workers movement use the nonviolent tactics of Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. When Chavez broke his 1968 fast, which means to not eat, presidential primary candidate Robert Kennedy visited him to show support for the cause. So let's take a look in the background. Bobby Kennedy was John F. Kennedy's little brother at the time he was running for president of the United States. The AFL-CIO is the abbreviation for the American Federation of Laborers and Congress of Industrial Organizations. Remember, we learned about unions earlier in the year. We talked about Sam Gumfers, who created the AFL. Now it's growing. All right. Grapes began rotting because no one was picking them. The growers were furious. Union members were attacked and beaten. The police helped the growers. Cesar Chavez had been inspired by Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and his own religious beliefs. He insisted that the farm workers fight with peaceful marches and prayers. Nonviolence, he told them, took more courage than violence. He also believed that it achieved more. It appealed to the conscience of good people everywhere. Chavez needed to draw attention to La Casa. He decided that a 300-mile march across much of California might just do it. He got university students and religious leaders to agree to march with the farm workers. Look at the map and find some place that is 300 miles from your home. Now imagine walking that far. Chavez's feet became blistered and his legs swollen. He could hardly walk, but he kept going. Television cameras whirled. Suddenly, everyone knew about La Casa. Some farm owners called Cesar Chavez a communist. He wasn't. But most people believed he was on the side of justice and fairness. Finally, a few growers signed contracts with the union, but most still would not. About this time, the Farm Workers Association was renamed the United Farm Workers. It became part of the national union, the AFL-CIO. Chavez denounced the boycott. He was going to speak across the United States, not to buy grapes grown in California. But boycotts work slowly, and some of his union members were impatient. They wanted to use violent methods. Chavez had to do something to control them and to make the growers pay fair wages. He did what Gandhi did. He went on a fast. For 25 days, he ate no food. Finally, 26 growers signed contracts with the union. Cesar Chavez started to eat again.